When it comes to choosing a mate, Solomon's example can be instructive to us. What qualities do we value in a marriage mate? Spiritual qualities? Or is it mainly the physical, and we hope that the spiritual will catch up later?
There's no champagne. There is no I do. And instead of a romantic kiss, the bride and groom sit through a 30-minute lecture about hellfire and adultery. That's a Jehovah's Witness wedding. But here's the real shocker. That lecture isn't the weirdest part. The weirdest part happens 5 years later when they're sitting in a windowless room with 3 male elders being told they cannot get divorced even if one of them cheated. Today, we're ripping the curtain off what actually happens inside these marriages, and 3 major news outlets have just confirmed the darkest details. So you want to get married, but first you have to find someone. Simple, right? Not if you're a Jehovah's Witness, because here is the rule. You can only date a baptized member of the faith, not someone who respects your beliefs, not someone who's open to converting. A baptized witness, that's it. Now do the math. If you live in a small town with 1 kingdom hall and 20 single people your age, your options are gone before you even start. And here is where it gets cruel. You're not supposed to date until you're past the bloom of youth, meaning past your peak sexual desire. So you wait. And by the time you're allowed to look, you're desperate. So what happens? People settle. They marry the first person who shows interest because the alternative is loneliness. And if your parents don't approve, too bad. Children living at home must obey their parents' dating rules, no exceptions. But here's the part nobody talks about. Even finding someone is a maze. You can't use dating apps, too worldly. You can't date a coworker, they're not witnesses. Your entire social circle is the congregation. And if you break the rules, you get called in front of the elders. Now, imagine finally finding that person. You're engaged. The wedding is coming. But before you say I do, there's one more hurdle. And this one is the most awkward conversation you'll ever have. 3 months before the wedding, the elders call you into a room. No witnesses, no lawyers, just you, your fiancé, and a panel of men who are about to ask you questions about your sex life. They don't ask about finances, they don't ask about parenting styles, they ask about what happens in the bedroom, what's allowed, what's forbidden, who leads. And if you lie, the marriage is canceled. Here's the official line. Jehovah's Witnesses view dating as a serious step toward marriage, but what they don't tell you is that the prep work is designed to make you afraid of getting it wrong, afraid of displeasing God, afraid of the elder's judgment. And the message is clear. Sex is for marriage only. But within marriage, it's complicated. The husband is the head. He leads. The wife submits. And if you have questions, you don't go to a therapist. You go back to the elders. But here's the real kicker. The religion actually discourages marriage and procreation. A former member revealed on TikTok that she was taught to see marriage as something to avoid if possible. So why build such a strict system around something you're not even supposed to want? Because it's not about marriage, it's about control. And once you're in, the control doesn't stop. In fact, it gets worse, because now you're not just a couple, you're a witness couple, and the congregation is watching. But what happens when the watching turns into judging? The wedding is over, the guests have gone home. Now the real test begins. Because in a Jehovah's Witness marriage, there is a chain of command. The husband is the head of the wife. That means he has the main role in providing for the family, materially, spiritually, and emotionally. He makes the major decisions. The wife, she submits. But here is where it gets sticky. The official teaching says the husband shouldn't be a dictator. He should love his wife as his own body. Sounds reasonable, right? Except the wife is expected to prove her love for God by submitting to her imperfect husband, even when he's wrong. And if she doesn't, she's not just disobeying her husband, she's disobeying Jehovah. Now imagine living that every day. Your opinion matters, but only if your husband agrees. You can speak up, but he has the final word. And if you push back too hard, you're labeled rebellious. The elders get involved. A 1997 academic study noted that women in the organization occupy a position of decreased personal power relative to men. They are commonly exhorted to remain in submission. That's a polite way of saying your voice only goes so far.
But what if your husband isn't just imperfect? What if he's abusive? Here is something the brochures don't tell you. In a Jehovah's Witness marriage, there is a third party, and that third party has more power than your spouse: the elders. These are men from the congregation. No marriage counseling degree, no psychology training, but they have the authority to intervene your marriage. They can call you in for a shepherding call. They can ask about your arguments, your intimacy, your private struggles. And if they don't like your answers, they can restrict your privileges. They can even recommend that you be disfellowshipped, cut off from everyone you know. The official line is that elders are not authorized to tell the couple what to do. But in practice, they decide what's scripturally sound. They decide if your marriage problems are serious enough to justify separation. They decide if you're spiritually endangering your spouse. And here is the scariest part. If you go to them for help, they don't send you to a therapist. They open the Bible to Ephesians 5:22 through 25. They tell the wife to submit more. They tell the husband to lead better. They don't ask why you're fighting. They just tell you to try harder. But what if trying harder isn't enough? What if you want out? You want a divorce. You've tried everything: counseling, prayer, long tearful talks with the elders. Nothing changes. The marriage is dead, emotionally, spiritually, physically. But here is the brutal truth. In the eyes of the organization, there is only one reason you can leave and ever marry again, and that reason is adultery. Not abuse, not neglect, not even irreconcilable differences, not even abandonment. Adultery. And you need proof. A confession, text messages, eyewitnesses, something concrete. Without that, you're locked in. Here is where it gets even twisted. Even if your spouse does commit adultery, you aren't required to divorce them. In fact, you're encouraged to forgive. The elders will pressure you to save the marriage. They'll tell you that forgiveness is the Christian thing to do. So even when you have the legal key to leave, the social pressure pushes you to stay. If you get a legal divorce without proving adultery, you are not scripturally free to remarry. In God's eyes, according to the organization, you're still married. If you remarry anyway, you're committing adultery, and that's a disfellowshipping offense. You lose everything. The Times of India confirmed this in their coverage. They reported that Jehovah's Witnesses prevent married couples from divorcing except in the case of adultery. It's not a fringe rumor, it's documented, it's enforced. And what about separation? The organization doesn't encourage it. Unless there's physical danger or a spouse refuses to provide for the family, separation is seen as a failure. If you separate without biblical grounds, you're still expected to be available to your spouse. No dating, no moving on, just waiting. So here is the reality. Thousands of witnesses are trapped in marriages they can't leave. Not because they want to stay, but because leaving means losing everyone. Your friends, your family, your congregation, your entire identity. And the elders, they don't offer escape. They offer Bible verses about forgiveness. But what if the marriage isn't just unhappy? What if staying means enduring harm? What happens when the husband isn't just imperfect? What happens when he's physically, verbally, or emotionally abusive? Here is the answer, and it's gut-wrenching. You're told to respect him anyway. You're told to win him over without a word through your conduct. You're told that your submission might save his soul. A former member revealed this on TikTok, and it went viral. She said Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to show respect to their abusers no matter what. They view it as a way to draw them closer to God. Think about that. You're being hurt, and the official response is, be more respectful, try harder, pray more. The India Times report touched on this indirectly. Their coverage noted that divorce is essentially forbidden. That means if you're in an abusive home, your options are practically zero. You can request a legal separation, but the elders will only approve it in extreme cases.
Even then, you can't remarry. You're stuck in limbo, married on paper, alone in reality. And if you leave anyway, without the elder's blessing, you're labeled rebellious, you're shunned, cut off from your parents, your children, your lifelong friends. A former member told legit.ng that she grew up thinking this was normal. She said, "We view everything that is not Jehovah's Witness as worldly. That includes family members who leave." So you stay, because the alternative is worse. You stay because leaving means losing your entire social universe. And the elders, they don't call the police. They don't offer shelter. They direct your attention to 1 Peter 3, 1-2, the verse about wives submitting to their husbands, so that even if some are disobedient to the word, they may be won without a word. But here is the darkest part. Many victims internalize this. They believe they deserve the abuse. They believe God is testing them. They stay for decades, convinced their suffering has spiritual value. And the organization knows this. They've been criticized for it, but they don't change the rules. Because the rules aren't about protecting people, they're about preserving the image of the organization. But there's another group suffering in silence, a group that faces a different kind of prison, one they're forced into before they even understand who they are. There is one group that suffers the most in this system, and you won't hear about them in the brochures. LGBTQ+ children raised in Jehovah's Witness homes. The organization is crystal clear. Homosexuality is a sin. It's listed alongside adultery and murder in their teachings. They've produced animated videos for children explaining that same-sex relationships will bar you from entering paradise. The NL Times reported on one such video. Dutch LGBT rights group COC called it painful, ruthless, and harmful. They said the messaging leads children to feel desperate. Now imagine being 13 years old. You're sitting in the Kingdom Hall watching that video with your family, and you realize with a sickening feeling that it's talking about you. But you can't tell anyone, not your parents, not your friends, because if you do, you'll be labeled a sinner. You'll be pressured to change. You'll be sent to the elders for spiritual guidance. And if you don't conform, you'll be shunned by everyone you've ever known. So what do? You hide, you pretend, you force yourself into a heterosexual marriage hoping it will fix you. You think, if I just try hard enough, God will make me normal. And then you spend the rest of your life in a lie, a marriage built on denial, children you didn't truly want, a spouse you can't truly love. A former member summed it up brutally. None of them can be described as coming from the younger generations. Instead, they produce propaganda. The message is clear. There is no room for you here. You can stay, but only if you silence yourself forever. And here is the cruelest irony. The organization officially discourages marriage. They tell young people to avoid it if possible. But for LGBTQ+ kids, marriage isn't just discouraged, it's a weapon used to beat their identity into submission, a prison they enter because the alternative, being alone, being shunned, being dead to their family, is too terrifying to face. Some don't survive it. The suicide rates among LGBTQ+ Jehovah's Witness youth are not publicly tracked, but former members speak of them in hushed tones. It's the great unspoken tragedy of this religion. But what happens when someone finally breaks free, when they wake up from the indoctrination and decide to leave? That is where the real war begins.